What's good, Dream Team, and welcome to today's video where we're going to learn Tailwind CSS by taking this web page and styling it to look like this web page. Now, if you're not familiar with Tailwind CSS, it's a CSS library that makes styling web pages infinitely easier than it was using traditional CSS. I personally use it in just about every single project I possibly can because it's just so much faster to design and style your web pages. And by the end of this video, you too will be able to incorporate it in all of your work. You'll be an absolute wizard, a CSS god. As always, if you don't immediately like the video, Doug is going to curse you with bad websites for 7 years. No pressure. Alrighty, class is in session and it's now time to dive into the code. And the first thing we'll be doing is setting up our Tailwind CSS project. Now this will work with any development framework, any front-end framework, but in this example we're going to set up Tailwind with a vanilla HTML web page. We don't need any fancy frameworks for this tutorial, but as I said, it will work for any. And the first thing we're going to do is open up a window and we're going to Google vite install Tailwind CSS, like so. This will also be linked in the description down below. And here you will see a link. It says install Tailwind CSS with vite. If we click on that, it's going to take us to a web page that has all the instructions we need to create our project. So what we can do is if we now open up a terminal, we'll need a terminal to start up our project. And here I have the project directory of my choosing open. I can just start out writing these commands. So I can go ahead and type npm create vite at latest, and then I'm just going to name the project. So it's going to be crystal-math. I'm not going to use the template lines like they do in the documentation. And if I hit enter on that, that's going to go ahead and install our project. Here we have to select the framework. We're just going to go with a vanilla framework, but you can see all the options. We'll go with a vanilla framework. We're going to select JavaScript only. And now what I can do is that has run our code. I'm going to open up an instance of Visual Studio Code Editor. Here I have a new blank window and I can hit open. It's going to take us to our project directories. You just want to find where all your projects are stored. Here we can see our new folder, Crystal Math, and I'm just going to hit open on that, and that's going to open up VS Code to our new project window. Now the other thing I'm going to do is open up a terminal instance within our VS Code. That's going to be important. There's a couple of ways you can do that, but you should be able to find the file options and go new terminal. And now we're just quickly going to take a look at the project directory we have here. We have a public folder that has some public assets that we don't have to worry about. We have a counter.js file that we can go ahead and delete. We also have a styles.css file, which we're going to go ahead and select everything within, empty it out so it's totally blank. And we also have an index.html. This is our hub. This is our main file that we're going to be editing. And we can see it has a script that links us to the main.js file. And we're actually going to go ahead and delete this file as well. And then if we come back into the index.html, we can remove this module line, but we'll do that in a second. So for the second, we can go ahead and delete everything within our index.html. So that's totally blank. And all we have left is the blank index.html and the blank styles.css. Up next on our list is we're going to come down to this npm install. We're going to copy that and paste it directly into our terminal here and hit enter on that. That's going to configure Tailwind CSS in our project. Once that installation is complete, we'll just copy the next line, paste that in as well. That's all done. We can see some files were created, and now we're just going to copy this information into the Tailwind, just replace the whole thing, save that. We can close these files. And the last thing is we have to copy in these directives to our style.css file just like that. And with that all done, we can go ahead and boot up our project and we can type npm run dev. That's going to start our project on either localhost 5173 or 5174 for me. And if we hit enter on that, that takes us to a completely blank web page. So what we've just done is we've successfully initiated our project to use Tailwind CSS. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to head over to the GitHub link in the description down below, and we're going to copy in some boilerplate HTML code that I've written out. This is not an HTML tutorial, it's just to learn Tailwind CSS specifically. And just like we have an index.html file, inside of the GitHub there will be an index_blank.html file. And that's the code that we will want to copy and paste into our file just here. So I've gone ahead and pasted it in. It's 113 lines. It's just some very basic HTML code. And if I go ahead and save that, that shows up on our page. So this is the blank web page that we're starting off with, and this is the page that we're going to make look absolutely beautiful and turn it into this awesome web page right here using a little bit of Tailwind CSS. So now that we've got our HTML code, we can actually start styling out our application. And we don't need anything except for these directives inside of the styles.css, so we can close that file. I can close the directory, we can minimize our terminal down the bottom, and we can just focus on the Tailwind CSS. Now, one thing that's important to mention is that I do actually have some default styles for this page that are plain old CSS, and I've just added them inside of the style tag. Likewise, you could add them in the styles.css file. And essentially, whenever I have a style that's too complicated for Tailwind CSS, which itself will cover around 99% of the use cases, I'll just whip up some plain old CSS because that's probably faster. You can see it's really not a lot, and typically it's to do with complicated shadows, which is what we'll see later. And so now we can get started with our Tailwind CSS. Now, the way Tailwind CSS works is instead of creating a regular style inside of our CSS sheet, for example, I could have one that's .background color, for example, and then to apply that, we would come in here and we would write class is equal to background color. How Tailwind CSS works is we literally just go ahead and write the styles straight into the classes as if they were actual classes. So in this case, if I wanted to give something a position of relative, I would literally just give it the class of relative, and that's going to do the trick. Likewise, if I wanted to change the text size, I could say text small. If I save this code right here, we can see that the text size of our page just adjusted. Likewise, I could set it back to the base size. I could set it to 4 extra large and it becomes absolutely huge. So there's a number of different text sizes we can use. In our project, we're going to set the text size to small. Now, one thing you might be thinking is, what if we have different page widths and we want to adjust our text size based on the page width? Well, Tailwind CSS works really well with mobile first design, where now what I could do is I could say at the small breakpoint, which is 640 pixels, I actually want to instead use the text base size. So I want to default to the text small, and if I'm above the small breakpoint, apply the text base size instead. So now if I save that, if I'm on a small page with its text small size, as I come up and meet that breakpoint, we can see the text size adjust, so that's really easy. The other thing we need for our project is to set a text color. Now, to set text colors, you just say text and then you give it the color that you choose and then a shade, which in this case could be 400. And if you come back to the Tailwind CSS documentation, it's absolutely brilliant. If you scroll a little bit, you can come to the colors and you can see all the different shades and the relative numbers. So in here, I applied a text green 400, which is this color right here. Now, these are their default colors. If we wanted to add in a custom value inside of Tailwind CSS, all you use is these square braces instead. And in this case, I'm going to give a hex code. So I use the pound key. And then I say 3929FF, and that's our custom color code that we're going to be using for our project. If I save that, now we get this nice indigo blue color. So that's actually our whole body styled. Literally, that's all it took. Super nice and neat. Didn't have to write any CSS, we wrote it straight into the class of the element. So now that's the body done, the next element on our list is this plain div right here. As always, we need to give it a class, and this one is going to be special because it's going to give us a grid styled background that looks super cool. And so all we're going to do is we're going to give it a position of absolute. All we do is we type in absolute. We're going to give it an inset of 0. So it's inset -0, and that's the same as setting the top, left, right, and bottom equal to 0. And we're going to give it a background of grid. Now, BG grid is a custom style that I have right here, and that's just a CSS style. So we can see we can apply traditional CSS styles adjacent alongside our Tailwind CSS styles as well. We're also going to give it a Z index, so that's Z dash, and you could very well use a default value of Z10. If you come back over to the documentation, you could just search and you could type Z dash index. That's going to give you all of the default values that they give you. In this case, we're actually going to give it a custom amount. So we're going to use these square braces, and I'm going to give it a -1 so that it sits behind every other element. And I'm also going to set the opacity to 50, which is equivalent to 0.5, and that's just by typing opacity 50. So now if we come to our web page, we see that we have this background grid applied behind all of our text. Up next on our list is the header. We're going to give that a class. The class is going to be equal to sticky for position of stick. We're going to give it a top of 0, so that's going to align it. We're going to give it a maximum width, so that's max dash w dash the value. And you could use a standard amount. I like to set a custom amount, so that's once again using these square parentheses around the value. After that, I give it a margin X of auto, which is just mx-auto. I give it a width of full, which is a width of 100%. And I'm also going to give it a padding of 4. That's equivalent to 2 rem. I quite like it. And then when we hit the small breakpoint and go up, I'm going to increase that to a padding of 8. And likewise, we're going to give it a flex display, which is just as easy as typing in flex. The default direction is row, which is what we want. We're going to align the item center by typing item center. We're going to justify the content between by typing justify between, and we'll give that a gap of 4 that at a small breakpoint or above jumps up to a gap of 8. So now if I save that, we can see that our header has a padding aligned, our book now button has moved over to the side, and our class is right here, nice and easy. Up next on our list is the button, because the H1 doesn't have any classes. The button is going to get a padding, except instead of setting an entire padding that surrounds the entire item, we're going to separately set the padding of X to a value of 6, and we're going to give the padding in the Y direction a value of 3. We're going to apply a light shadow, which is a custom CSS style that we have above. We're also going to give it a cursor of pointer so that it has the click event on it. We're going to say rounded full, which sets an entire border radius of it to make it as circular as possible. It's essentially border radius of 100%. We're also going to set the background color. Instead of just saying background equal to, it's BG dash the color, so that's going to be white. We're going to give it a blue shadow, which is a custom CSS class that I defined above. And then we're going to set the font to medium, which is the font weight. That's a medium font weight. And if I save that, we can see our button just shows up looking all pretty, and it's completely done. Next up on our list is the main element. Now this one's super easy. And in this one, we're going to set a minimum height to the 100% of the view height. So we just say min dash h dash screen, super simple. We're going to give it a display of flex and a flex direction of column, which is just flex dash col. Inside of here, we have a section. This is also going to have a class, and the class is equal to the flex, same again, the flex column. We're going to give it a maximum dash width dash custom value that matches our header of 1000 pixels. And likewise, we're going to set the width equal to 100% and the margin in the X direction of automatic. We're going to give it a padding of 8, a gap of 8, and then at a medium breakpoint, we're going to set the gap to 14. And on a small screen, we're going to set the padding in the vertical direction to 14. And then at the medium breakpoint, we're going to jump it up again to a padding Y of 20. So now we can see that's kind of spread out our main content a little bit. It's starting to come along. Now for our H2, we're going to give this a class of font bold. That's going to make the font extra bold. We're going to give it a base text size of 2 extra large, so that's text 2XL. Then we're going to set the small breakpoint, we're going to set it up to a 4 extra large size. And then at the medium, we're going to go up again, 5XL. And then at the large breakpoint, we're going to go even higher to the text 6 extra large. And lastly, we're going to set the text alignment to center by typing text center. Nice and easy, and now we can see our text is styled. Next on our list is the paragraph. This one is going to have a class equal to mx auto. For the margin X automatic, we're going to give a maximum width that's a little bit less than the width of our main section. So we're going to set that to a custom value of 800 pixels. We'll set the width to full, so a width of 100%. We also need the text alignment to be centered in this case, and we're going to set the default text size to base because currently it will be inherited from the body where we set the default to small. We want this to be slightly larger, so we're going to set it to text base, and then at a small screen size, we're going to jump up to a text large, and then at the medium we're going to go up to extra large. So that's looking pretty cool. We have a great site for selling some pure math made crystal clear. Sounds absolutely excellent, just what we all need. With that paragraph complete, I'm going to enter these lines down because my brain just needs it to be separated like that. After that paragraph, we have this div right here. Now this is going to have a grid layout instead of a flex layout, and it's so easy. All we do is we type grid to say that it's going to be a grid. We can set the number of columns by saying grid cols 1, and then on a small breakpoint, we're actually going to jump up to grid cols 2. So when we're above a small breakpoint, we will instead have 2 grid columns. Now we're going to set the base gap to 4. At the small breakpoint, we'll jump that up to an 8 as well. And likewise, at the small breakpoint, we're going to set the width to fit instead of full. So it's the minimum container size to fit all its contents within it. And likewise, on the small breakpoint, we're going to set the MX or the margin X to auto, and we'll give it a padding Y of 4. So here we can see we have our 2 buttons, button A and button B. And as I make the page bigger, it jumps from being in a 1-column grid to a 2-column grid. Just like that, nice and simple. So those are our 2 buttons. Now we actually need to style the buttons themselves. So this first one is going to have a padding horizontally, padding X of 6. We're going to give it that light shadow custom style that we made above, or that we imported above from the boilerplate code. We'll give it a padding in the vertical direction of 3 until we hit the small breakpoint, and then we're going to jump that padding up a bit to a padding X of 10. Likewise, on the small breakpoint, we're going to jump the padding Y up to a 4. We'll give it a cursor of pointer. We'll give it a border radius of 100% with a rounded full for some perfectly circular borders. We're going to set the background to white. We're going to give it the blue shadow, likewise in the same way we did it with the Book Now button, and finally a font weight of medium. So that's our first button just there, looking nice and pretty. And then we're going to do the secondary button, which is just going to be a little bit different. This is going to have the similar class of padding X6, light shadow, padding Y of 3. On the small breakpoint, we'll go to a padding X of 10. On the small breakpoint, we'll go to a padding Y of 4. Except this time we'll give it a custom background color using these square brackets and the 3929FF hex code. We'll still need the cursor pointer. We'll still need the rounded full. We'll give it the blue shadow, which is the custom CSS shadow, and we'll give it a font weight of medium. So there is our second button. Obviously, we can't see that, so we're going to set some classes on these paragraphs. First up, we have the Book Now button. That's going to have a text size of base until the small breakpoint, and then we'll go up to a text size of large. And then on the medium, we'll go up to text extra large, and that's going to be pretty much the same on this paragraph just here. Class of text base until the small breakpoint where we go up to text large, and then at the medium we go text extra large, but we're also going to give this a text color of white so that it shows up right there. And now when I come out to a wider screen, we see that we get the text color within the button showing up appropriately depending on the background, so that looks super tidy. Now that's the 2 buttons done. Up next we have this ranking system, so that's this div right here. We'll always give it the same old class, and this is going to have a class of flex, a display of flex. Items center, which is going to align the items centrally. We'll give it a gap of 4, a margin horizontally or MX of auto, a text size of base, and at the small breakpoint we'll jump up to a text of large. That's going to put everything just here. Still looking a bit wonky, but we will get there. The 4.6 is absolutely fine. Now we're going to give a class to this star collection. Now these are font awesome icons, so the class already has the icon specification, but we're going to modify it in a second. But first we have to give a class to the container div. That's also going to have a display of flex, align item center, but this time a gap of 0.5. So now we can see our icons are kind of working. We've got this last one being a little bit difficult, but we'll get to that in a second. For each of these, I'm going to use the Alt or Option key to select all of them, including this one down here. And I'm going to give them a text color of amber 400. That's going to make them look the appropriate star color. And for this div right here, this one's going to have a class of grid, and we're going to place items center. That's the shortcut for centering anything within a parent container. We're also going to give it a position of relative. And the reason we're going to do that is because for this div right here, the one within, we're going to give this a display of flex. We're going to justify the content to the end of the div, and I'm going to give it a custom width of 40% of the parent element using the square braces. I'm also going to give it an absolute positioning atop of 1/2, which is 50%. Then we're going to minus translate y 1/2. That's equivalent to translate y minus 50%. So that's for centering. And then I'm just going to set the right positioning equal to 0. And finally have an overflow of hidden. And then what I can do is give this icon star within a text color of white. And if I save that, we can see the effect is it's cut off 40% of that final star, which if we look at our code, the rating is 4.6. So the 0.4 that's left over is cut off the end. And so now our star looks appropriately. So essentially all we've done is we have this star right here as the last star. And then we have an absolutely positioned white star on top that just blocks off 40% of the visible star here. So that's pretty straightforward. Now we're almost done. The last thing we're going to do is come down to the footer. This just needs a class of flex, item center, and justify center. That's equivalent to grid place item center. It's just going to put all of the contents directly in the middle. And I'm going to give it a padding y of 10. And now that just shows up down the bottom, made with love. And just like that, we have a fully responsive web application. It looks super clean. And if I inspect it and load it onto a mobile screen, we can see that it's totally responsive as well. Our buttons go in the proper orientation. Everything looks nice and neat. I can adjust it and we can watch it jump around and respond as we need. If we come over to the code, my favorite thing about it is if I see a problematic item, I just have to find the item and I can see the styles that are applied to it directly, and so I can immediately figure out what's gone wrong. We've also seen that we can use custom styles in the same way. So for example, here I have this box shadow that's going to create this nice shadow effect up the top, and we see that when we hover we get that little layover. That's something semi-complicated to create in Tailwind CSS, so I've used plain old CSS. That's the light shadow style right here, but that's literally all the old school CSS I use. Everything else is done with Tailwind CSS. Now there's absolutely more that you can do with Tailwind CSS. If you want to see some advanced content, I'd recommend checking out the video linked in the description down below for some more advanced Tailwind concepts. But everything you need to know to start building wicked cool applications with Tailwind CSS is right in this code just here. That's literally all it takes to take a web page looking from how it was at the start of the video to make it look absolutely beautified. Anyway, that's the whole video. If you've enjoyed, make sure to smash the like and subscribe buttons. Love that support, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace. Learning to code? If so, be sure to check out the Learn to Code roadmap or dive straight in with these videos. That's a good one.